There comes a moment in every man's life when something inside begins to fracture, quietly, invisibly, but with growing force. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't come with warning signs. It begins the moment he places his entire worth in someone else's hands. And most often those hands belong to a woman. Carl Jung didn't speak of women as defective men. He didn't reduce them to incomplete beings. Instead, he pointed at something more dangerous, the unconscious projection, the illusion a man creates when he fails to see a woman as she is and instead sees only what he needs her to be. Jung taught us that every human carries a shadow, the part we refuse to acknowledge, the part we suppress. For men, that shadow often hides behind the worship of the feminine. The more he feels empty inside, the more he idealizes her. The more he fears his inner chaos, the more he clings to her beauty, her calm, her promise of salvation. But salvation was never her role. From childhood, he is programmed to believe in this illusion, that somewhere out there exists a woman who will love him unconditionally, fix him without asking, and validate him without question. Cartoons, fairy tales, songs, movies, they all paint her as the prize, the reward, the missing half of his soul. And so he begins to search for her before he even knows who he is. Jung called this projection anima, the feminine image within the male unconscious. When unexamined, it possesses him. He falls not in love with the real woman, but with his inner fantasy of her. And because that fantasy is perfect, the real woman will always fail him, not because she's flawed, but because she's human. This is not a woman's fault. It's a man's blindness. He doesn't see that while he dreams, she observes. While he offers his devotion, she measures his stability. While he loses himself in her, she evaluates whether he's truly grounded or just emotionally dependent. And when he isn't, she pulls away. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but because her instinct is survival. A woman is not drawn to weakness dressed as love. She is repelled by a man who abandons himself just to please her. Because deep down, she knows if he can't hold his own ground, he won't be able to protect hers either, but he doesn't see it that way. He sees rejection, betrayal, injustice. He gave her everything, his time, his soul, his dreams, and she left. Or worse, she stayed and slowly disconnected. The man who once stood tall is now a shell, chasing messages, decoding silences, begging for affection in a language he never learned to speak. And this is where he begins to disappear. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually. He stops asking himself important questions. He stops building his own foundation. His world becomes a mirror, and she's the only reflection that matters. He trades his purpose for her presence, his integrity for her attention. And when she leaves, and she often will, he's left with nothing, not even himself. This isn't love. It's dependency, and dependency is the death of masculine strength. Carl Jung warned us, the man who does not integrate his shadow will become its slave. He will seek validation in women, approval in their eyes, meaning in their acceptance. And every time he is not chosen, he will collapse. Not because of her decision, but because he never chose himself first. A woman cannot save you. She was never meant to. Her role is not to build your identity, but to respond to it. Not to give you purpose, but to test whether you've found one. Not to carry your weight, but to see if you can carry your own. And if you can't, she won't stay. She will lose interest. She will retreat, not with words, but with silence. Not with fights, but with absence. And you will react with more effort, more gifts, more declarations, thinking you're being romantic, when in truth, you're just becoming invisible. The man who projects his salvation onto a woman will always feel betrayed, not because she lied to him, but because he lied to himself. He didn't love her. He loved the image. He loved the fantasy. He loved the story that made him feel whole. And when the story broke, so did he. But this breaking is sacred. It's the collapse of illusion. It's the death of the boy who believed he needed to be loved to feel worthy. And from that death, the real man can be born, not in hate, not in bitterness, but in clarity. Because once you stop chasing the woman who never existed, you start finding the man who always did. Carl Jung once said that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. But for many men, this burden mutates into something deeper, the unlived life within themselves. And what fills that vacuum is the anima, not a real woman, but the inner image of what she should be, ideal, pure, saving. From the earliest stages of boyhood, this image is fed to him like medicine. He is told, without words, that his chaos will be healed by her calm, that his confusion will be ordered by her clarity, that his pain will be cradled by her infinite empathy. He grows not into a man, but into a seeker, a believer, a worshipper of the feminine unknown. But there's a cost, because when a man projects his anima onto a real woman, he doesn't see her, not truly. He sees a screen onto which he casts his unmet needs. He looks for the mother he didn't fully connect with, the nurturer who will soothe his abandoned inner child, the goddess who will give meaning to his wandering soul. And here begins the trap. He confuses depth with dependency. He believes devotion means erasure of self. He calls submission love and calls love surrender. He forgets the boundary between being emotionally available and being emotionally vulnerable to the point of self-destruction. The anima is powerful. She is seductive, divine and untouchable, but she is also a shadow. And unless a man integrates her within his psyche, she will dominate him from the outside. You'll recognize this man. He chases, he overtexts, he apologizes for things he didn't do. He reshapes his identity around her preferences, her moods, her rhythms. He calls this being considerate, but what he's really doing is vanishing, slowly, willingly, tragically. Jung didn't teach men to reject women. He taught them to stop expecting women to save them. To project the unconscious anima onto a partner is to load her with impossible expectations. She must be nurturing but never smothering, passionate but always loyal, mysterious but emotionally available, soft yet decisive. It's a moving target, a setup for disillusionment. When she fails, and she will, because she's human, the man feels betrayed, but it's not her betrayal, it's his mind recoiling from its own fantasy. And this is when many men fall apart. Not because they were deceived, but because their entire internal structure was built on a lie they told themselves. If I can just win her love, everything will finally make sense. But what if love isn't the answer? What if the woman wasn't the goal, but the mirror? What if she didn't break him? She revealed that he was already broken. Jung's work demands that a man turn inward, that he meet his unconscious, confront the shadow, and face the anima not as a fantasy to be worshipped, but as a psychic figure to be integrated. Only then can he see women as they are, not as saviors, but as sovereign beings. This means letting go of the myth that says she will complete me. She won't, she can't, that is not her task. She can complement you, she can inspire you, she can even walk beside you in your path, but she cannot give you a path, and when you ask her to, she will resent you for it. Why? Because deep down, a woman does not want to mother a man. She wants to feel his solidity, his presence, his rootedness. The man who can carry his own emotional weight is the one who attracts her, not the one who collapses into her arms every time he feels unsteady. In modern culture, this truth is uncomfortable. Men are taught to be in touch with their feelings, to open up, to be vulnerable. And yes, emotional honesty is vital. But Jung warns us that true integration does not mean spilling your soul to earn love. It means confronting yourself so that you no longer need to be loved to function. When you do that, something changes. The need to be desired is replaced by the desire to be whole, and a whole man is magnetic, not because he plays games or withholds emotion, but because he knows where he stands, even when no one's watching. This is the core of Jung's teaching on the individuation process, the journey of becoming the self, not the lover, not the pleaser, not the protector or the provider or the rescuer, but the self, the man who is no longer at war with his unconscious, the man who can sit in silence and not feel empty, the man who can see a woman and not fall into fantasy, but into presence. Now let's be honest, presence is not as exciting as fantasy. Fantasy is easier, it's smoother, it doesn't demand growth, but fantasy doesn't hold you when things fall apart. Fantasy doesn't tell you the truth. Fantasy doesn't stand by you when you fail. Only reality does. And reality begins when you stop projecting and start perceiving. So how does a man know if he's living in projection? He's constantly confused by her signals. He's easily shaken by her silence. He feels powerful when desired and worthless when ignored. He gives too much too fast, then grows resentful when it's not returned. He bases his self-worth on how she looks at him. This man is not in a relationship. He's in a performance, a loop, a spell. Carl Jung would say he is possessed by his anima, and the only way out is to stop looking for her in the world and start facing her within. To realize that the chaos he feels is not hers to fix, it is his to understand. That, the loneliness he blames on women, is really the echo of his own disconnection from the self. This doesn't mean becoming cold or detached. Jung never preached repression. He spoke of integration, the ability to hold opposing forces without collapsing, to feel deeply but not drown, to love truly but not lose the self in the process. And that's what modern men must reclaim, not their dominance, but their depth. A man who has integrated his anima can love a woman without idolizing her. He can enjoy her presence without needing it to feel whole. He can walk away when respect is lost, not in anger but in calm certainty. Because he no longer trades his soul for her attention, he has retrieved it. And in doing so, he has become what Jung called individuated, not perfect, not emotionless, but complete. The world needs more of these men. Men who no longer seek to be chosen, but to choose. Men who are not addicted to being seen, but are committed to seeing. Men who no longer fear rejection because they have stopped rejecting themselves. And perhaps the most powerful realization of all, she was never the enemy. She was the test, not to prove your worth, but to show you whether you knew it. There's a moment, silent, almost imperceptible, when a man stops living for himself and begins to live for her gaze. He changes his words, adjusts his posture, softens his truth, not out of malice, not out of manipulation, but out of unconscious habit, the deeply rooted instinct to be acceptable, to be chosen, to be loved. And it's in that moment, gentle as it may seem, when he begins to vanish. Carl Jung would call this the triumph of persona over self. The persona is the mask we wear to face the world. It's how we adapt. But when the mask becomes our identity, we lose access to our core. We no longer live from truth, we live from reaction. And that's the beginning of emotional slavery. When a man adapts himself constantly to gain her approval, he's not loving her, he's bargaining with his soul. He abandons his mission in favor of her comfort. He sacrifices his authenticity in exchange for her affection. He stops being a man with a direction and becomes a boy seeking a mother's warmth in a woman's body. But she wasn't meant to mother him. She was meant to mirror him. And if what she reflects is confusion, self-abandonment, and inner emptiness, she will feel unsafe. Not because he is cruel or violent, but because he lacks center, because she cannot rest in a man who has not claimed himself first. This is a brutal but necessary awakening, the moment when a man realizes it's not that she rejected him, it's that she responded to his own rejection of self. He wanted to be accepted before he had accepted himself. He wanted to be loved before he knew how to love his own depth. He expected her to carry the burden of his unformed identity, and when she couldn't, when she pulled away, he called it betrayal. But there was no betrayal. There was reflection, a pure and honest response to a man who hadn't yet stood fully. In his being, Jung reminds us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And this is exactly what happens in modern relationships. A man unconsciously hands over the power of his emotional worth to a woman, then calls it heartbreak when she walks away. But he was never broken by her. He was broken by his refusal to meet himself. When you look at today's love stories, you don't see union, you see dependency. You see men orbiting women, desperate for signals, for text replies, for signs they're still wanted. You see them contorting themselves to avoid discomfort, hiding their opinions to maintain peace, erasing their passions for fear of losing connection. This isn't love, it's survival. It's the collapse of the masculine principle. And here's what makes it worse. It's often praised. The nice guy who always listens, always sacrifices, always agrees, is celebrated until he is forgotten. Until the same woman who once seemed to adore him loses interest, distances herself, and seeks someone else. And he doesn't understand. But I did everything right, he says. No, he did everything safe, everything passive, everything external. He forgot the one thing she actually needed from him. Center Jung taught that a man must live with a foot in the unconscious. That means being connected to his instincts, his emotions, his symbolic life. A man who lacks this connection becomes hollow, externally functional, internally starved, and he tries to feed that starvation through her love. But no matter how much she gives, it's never enough, because it wasn't meant to fill him. That's his task. So what does a man do when he realizes he's built his world around her gaze? First, he doesn't blame her. That's the reflex of the boy. The man understands. She simply responded to his energetic posture. She didn't leave him. She left the absence of him. Second, he stops chasing, not just her, but the illusion. He stops chasing approval, validation, and belonging in her world. He recognizes that those things cannot be earned externally. They must be claimed internally. Third, he turns inward. He begins the work Jung considered essential: individuation, the integration of the shadow, the confrontation with his fears, his needs, his projections. He meets the parts of himself he once outsourced to her, and he brings them home. This is not a gentle journey. It is raw. It is shattering. It demands that a man dismantle the myth of salvation and build from the rubble the reality of self-possession. It means recognizing the ways he has made himself small to be accepted. The times he said yes when he meant no. The relationships he prolonged because he was terrified of silence. The truth he avoided to keep the peace. The dreams he postponed so he wouldn't threaten her comfort. And most of all, it means admitting this: he was never truly present, not with her, not with himself. He was performing, playing the role of the good man, the romantic partner, the reliable one. But roles are not relationships. Roles are cages. And eventually, the soul rebels. The mask cracks. The truth leaks through. And sometimes that's when she leaves, not because he was bad, but because he wasn't real. She never met him. She met his adaptation, his compromise, his filtered self, and that is not attractive. A woman respects presence, not perfection. She's drawn to authenticity, not appeasement. She wants to feel the weight of a man who stands on his own axis, not one who spins around hers. So if you've lost her and you're left with nothing but silence, use it. Let it teach you. Let it burn away the illusions. Let it strip you down to what's real, because here is the secret Jung hinted at but never screamed. It was never about her. It was always about you. She didn't destroy you. She revealed you. She showed you where you had given up your spine in exchange for a smile, where you traded your voice for her comfort, where you replaced your intuition with her opinions. This isn't about blaming her. It's about claiming yourself. The masculine is not born in the arms of a woman. It is born in the fire of self-confrontation, in the decision to stop looking outward for validation and start rooting inward for truth. The man who does this becomes unshakable, not because he becomes hard or indifferent, but because he becomes whole. His value is no longer a negotiation. His presence is no longer a performance. His life is no longer a campaign to be loved. He is love. He is direction. He is clarity. And when he meets a woman again, he doesn't beg for her affection. He sees her, he respects her, but he no longer disappears for her. He stays with himself always. Break. Freeze. There is a moment, a quiet, irreversible moment when the illusion breaks, not with drama, not with screaming, but with silence. A silence that echoes deeper than noise. A silence that doesn't ask questions because it already knows the answer. That's when the man finally sees it. She was never going to save him, not because she was cruel, but because it was never her role. It was never anyone's. This is the collapse of the myth. The fairy tale he was fed since childhood, the idea that his life would finally make sense once she appeared, once she chose him, once she stayed. The belief that happiness was not within, but hidden in the arms of another. But now, she's gone. Or maybe she's still there, and yet she feels distant. Something in him has shifted, and for the first time he doesn't see a goddess. He sees a woman, human, whole, flawed, real, and in her humanness he sees his own projection, dissolving. The fantasy collapsing like a house of cards. Carl Jung anticipated this moment. He knew the masculine psyche was not merely built on logic and strength, but on narrative and archetype. And when that narrative is exposed as fantasy, when the anima is withdrawn from the outer world and faced inwardly, the man is left with a confrontation more terrifying than abandonment. He has never met himself. He has become so wrapped in pleasing, performing, pursuing, that the core of his being was left untouched. His dreams were adapted to hers, his values distorted to fit her comfort, his identity constructed from fragments of her attention. But now, it's all gone. And for the first time, there is space. The kind of space that feels like death, but births something higher, because in the silence something ancient stirs, not rage, not pride, presence. He starts to breathe differently, slower, deeper. He no longer refreshes the screen, hoping for a message. He no longer rehearses lines in his mind. He no longer waits for closure, because now he sees clearly there is nothing to close that wasn't already broken long before she arrived. He no longer asks why she changed. He asks why he never did. This is the threshold Jung described, where the ego breaks and the self begins to emerge. The journey of individuation does not start in pleasure. It begins in collapse, in the brutal honesty of looking in the mirror and admitting, I gave her everything because I didn't know how to give anything to myself. It hurts, but it's sacred, because that pain is the price of awakening, the cost of remembering what was lost, the cost of reclaiming what was never truly gone, the axis of the masculine, the inner ground, the unshakable core. Now he no longer fears being alone, because he's not. He's with himself fully, consciously, powerfully. This changes everything. He no longer falls for softness that hides chaos. He no longer chases beauty that whispers control. He is no longer drawn into a game he didn't know he was playing. He sees her, and perhaps for the first time, he respects her. Not as an ideal, not as a reward, as a being, as a mirror, as a mystery. and he realizes her role was never to validate his existence. Her presence only revealed whether he was truly present in his own. So maybe he walks away, or maybe he stays. But either way, it's no longer about approval. It's about truth. He no longer needs her to reflect his worth because he's found it, anchored it, lived it without apology. This is what Jung meant by wholeness, not perfection, not armor, but integration, the ability to hold contradiction, to walk with both light and shadow, to love deeply without losing form, to connect without collapsing. And when this man meets a woman again, it's not to possess or to prove. It's to meet, to see, to stand beside, not beneath. He no longer loves with a hunger to be completed. He loves with the calm strength of someone who is already full. And when she tests him, as all relationships eventually do, he does not bend to win her favor. He remains, not stubbornly, not arrogantly, but rooted, attuned, aware. Because now he knows the truth. She was never the enemy. She was the mirror that reflected not who he was, but who he still needed to become. And now, with the mirror behind him, the path opens. It is not a straight road. There will still be longing, still be shadows, still be echoes of the boy who once begged to be chosen. But now he does not follow those echoes. He faces them, he holds them, he walks with them, because the man who has retrieved himself, his voice, his soul, his direction, is no longer at the mercy of desire. He is desire. He is clarity. He is silence unafraid. He is the axis around which his life turns. No woman, no absence, no betrayal can take that from him again, because he no longer lives through her gaze. He lives through his own eyes, wide open. You were never weak for loving her. You were human, but now you're awake. And once you wake up, there's no going back. You can't unsee the truth. You can't return to the illusion. You can't keep pretending that losing yourself is love, that silence means safety, that approval equals connection. You were not born to orbit someone else's world. You were meant to build your own. And from that place, to choose, not beg, to invite, not chase, to stand, not perform. This isn't about rejecting her. It's about reclaiming you. Because she was never the test of your worth. She was the reflection of your readiness. And if she left, it wasn't punishment. It was permission to finally meet the version of you that no longer needs her to feel whole. That version, the one who doesn't need to be chosen to feel valuable, is the man the world fears and secretly admires. And now, you're here. Fully, quietly, unapologetically. So let them wonder where you went. Let her wonder who you've become. You're no longer a shadow begging to be seen. You are the fire that no longer flickers for attention. You burn with your own light. And that is terrifying. See you on the other side. Take care, and until next time.